Hello and welcome back to Northeast Nostalgic. Today we're discovering the huge array of historic gems within Roker Sunderland. You might think that a coastal place simply cannot have this amount of history, just deck chairs and donkeys. Well, think again. We have tales of a World War I U-boat shipwrecked off Roker Pier, the legend of a Sunderland pirate, and a set of stairs where dead animals would wash up at. Who knew Sunderland could be so interesting? So grab yourself a cuppa and let's get going. Roker Marina is where I love to start my walk. It's so picturesque and quiet. But did you know that this area wasn't actually intended for a boat marina? It was actually meant to be the main North Dock for trade. Built on an area covering only 6 acres, the North Dock was designed by the legendary Isambard Kingdom Brunel and was funded by Sir Hedworth Williamson. Work began on the dock in 1828. By the time it opened in 1837, the dock was already too small. It simply couldn't cope with the needs of a rapidly expanding coal trade. Developing the harbour was a political and financial battle for all the local wealthy families that were prepared to finance the project in order to enhance their own interests. Sir Hedworth Williamson was from one of these wealthy families who owned rights along the River Wear banks and had interests in developing Wearmouth as a wet dock for the new harbour. Hedworth's idea was controversial, with other parties' ideas favouriting the South Bank. To enhance his idea, Sir Hedworth formed the Wearmouth Dock Corps in 1834 and appointed the engineer Isambard Kingdom Brunel to prepare the plans for his great new dock. Brunel's plan linked the North Dock to the Southern Colliery through a railway line, running across a suspension bridge structure which would carry 2 tracks one above the other. The bridge was never made, but it would have been so interesting to know what it would have been like. There was opposition based on an argument that the best of Sunderland's coal would be taken away to the Tyne, but Sir Hedworth decided to go ahead and build the North Dock anyway, on undeveloped land from just before the old North Pier. The North Dock was square in shape, just how it looks today, but with gates that opened from a small river basin, allowing ships to come into the dock from the river or the sea. The basin was tidal, so the dock could only be opened during higher water levels, which meant that the trade was restricted to when it could dock or depart. The inadequate size of the dock led to the nickname Sir Hedworth's Bathtub, leading to a new dock being built on the south side in 1846. The South Dock had an area which covered 43 acres, being a much better size for Sunderland's growing industry as the biggest shipbuilding town in the world. Did you know that there was a gun battery near the old North Pier? Whilst coastal defences to our little northeast coast now seem a bit silly, back in the Victorian era they were big on creating defences around Great Britain in case overseas wars ended up on our shores. Wave Basin Battery was constructed in circa 1882 at the entrance of the River Wear, with the land being given to the War Office in 1860 by the River Wear Commissioners for defence purposes. It is a rare survival from a time of transition between cannons and modern artillery, with masonry structures alongside a fire and parapet for infantry defence. The battery consisted of 4 80-pounder rifle-loading guns and was used to defend Merseyrail ports in the years after the Crimean War. Just before we reach Roker Beach, we head towards Sunderland's Lost Pier. The crumbling Old North Pier was completed in 1796 and held Sunderland's first ever lighthouse. The stone lighthouse was so heavy that it began to tilt on the pier, so was demolished. At this time, there was 2 projecting piers in Sunderland, and they were inadequate for the bustling port, so plans for 2 curved piers were proposed in the late 19th century. Once the curved piers were in place, the Old North Pier was in the way, so it was shortened. This section of Roker Beach has the nickname the Blockyard. Can you guess why it got that name? When the pier was being built, blocks of concrete were made here in timber moulds before being lifted by a gantry crane into rail wagons. The wagons would then travel up the rails that you can still see on Roker Pier today, where they were then stacked to form the structure of the pier by a larger crane. In this rare photograph from the 14th of September 1885, you can see the work starting on the new Roker Pier, alongside the blockyard to the right. The ceremony to lay the foundation stone occurred on this day, and you can see the little group of people next to the crane. We head up the steep bank next to the watch house for a surprising little hidden gem of history. Next to the Sunderland institution, the Bungalow Cafe, is a very interesting signpost pointing to the beach, the village, the bungalow, and also to Germany. The Curious to Germany sign has been a fixture on the Roker coast since the 1920s, with no one quite knowing where it came from and why it's there. The sign was removed during World War II, presumably because our boys knew already how to get to Germany, and then it was restored thereafter. The sign now points directly to the mouth of the River Elbe in Germany, with the help of the nearby life station. Apparently, it was claimed you could see the Rhineland on a good day. The bungalow cafe next to the sign feels like a part of the Roker coastline, having been built in the early Edwardian period around 1907. It occupies a prominent position on the top of the embankment, having some of the best views of the coast. We follow the stone promenade down to the path leading down to the beach, with the old Roker amusements that we can see in the distance. Apparently it's earmarked for demolition, but I remember loving to play the slot machines in there. Taking a right, we walk in towards Roker Pier for our next historic gem. Roker Lighthouse and Pier are a Victorian feat of engineering, featuring blocks of Aberdeen granite that give the lighthouse its decidedly Sunderland themed colours. I recently created a video all about the history and construction of the lighthouse and pier. I'll link it in the description if you'd like to find out more. This boxy structure before the pier leads to an underground tunnel to the lighthouse. You can even see a peek of the stairs below through the glass. I'm yet to go on a tour here, but I definitely want to do one in the future. We approach the pier for our next historic gem, which is actually not on the pier, but actually somewhere in the sea, just off the lighthouse. Did you know that a World War I German U-boat was blown up in Sunderland? Germany ran a U-boat campaign against Britain's merchant shipping during the war, as an attempt to starve Britain into surrendering. U-boat UC-32 was commissioned on the 12th of August 1916 and was well armed, including one 88mm deck gun and 3 bone-on stern torpedo tubes. It carried 18 UC-200 mines meant to disrupt vessels from entering and leaving our riverways. Whilst also being armed, UC-32 was reported to be quite speedy, being capable of approximately 12 knots surface speed and 7.4 knots submerged. As a mine-lane submarine, UC-32 had a general patrol area from the Humber to the Tyne. As well as laying destructive weapons, she was also a bit of a bully, and would harass trawlers at the mouth of the River Wear. She would lie in wait until vessels left the river, then she would surface and sink them with her deck gun, submerging under the surface before any ship or planes could catch her. UC-32 was causing such a nuisance on our river that the Royal Navy got together with local fishermen and made a plan. They armed a steam fishing trawler with a large deck gun and kept it camouflaged until the submarine surfaced. They then threw the covers off and let blaze at the U-boat. Taken by surprise, UC-32 immediately crash-dived, leaving an unfortunate sailor still on her deck. The submarine got away that time, but the sailor on board sadly drowned. On the 23rd of February 1917, UC-32 was starting to lay her mines off the river mouth in 12 metres of water when she ironically accidentally struck one of her own mines. The vessel blew up and sank with torpedoes and 14 mines on board, killing 19 of her crew, but the captain and 2 sailors were rescued. A fault occurred with the plug holding the mine, detonating the U-boat, which sunk 13 metres to the seabed. It was thought that the plug that held the mine to the sinker must have dissolved too quickly, releasing the mine, which exploded under the stern end. The wreck was found by divers in 1989 and was blown up by Navy divers later that year. And after lying under the sea for 99 years, HMS Blythe blew up a live torpedo that was still in sight in 2016. A piece of seaside nostalgia lies in the form of this old Roker amusements building that used to be Bellaby's. Hearing the rush of pennies in the slot machines is always a key childhood memory for me, although I never quite won the jackpot. This building has been earmarked for demolition since last summer, with a new building taking its place, so it'll be interesting to follow the process of our changing coastline. Next to the amusements is another historic gem that only some will remember. Do you remember when this used to be Roker's paddling pool? Built in 1938, the Art Deco outside paddling pool was part of the heyday of Sunderland's busy seaside resort, and a favourite for all on their summer holidays. Something so simple like a dip in the pool, then sand shoes on and a bag of chips to eat on the bus on the way home would be the highlight of many people's summers. I wasn't allowed in the pool, unfortunately, as my mum had said the water was too dirty. The pool was filled with concrete a few years ago, but there are still glimpses of the Art Deco brickwork that remind you of what it used to be. Next to Granny Annie's, there's a beautiful old Art Deco shelter that used to be used to get changed, as well as where lost children could be found. Wooden benches lined the walls, allowing holiday makers to get changed and get the sand out of their toes. Lost children were often tannoyed to shelters like this after becoming detached from a family amongst the very busy beaches of the day. The lost child's name, age and address would be quickly read over a tannoy so the child's parents know that they were safe and ready to collect. Today the shelter is completely empty, apart from an Alice in Wonderland themed mural, but apparently there are plans to turn it into a bar, with backing from George Clark. Do you know the story of Spotty the Bandit, the famous Sunderland pirate? Roker's coastline was full of old caves originally, full of places for smugglers and pirates to get up to no good. This area was adapted after Hedworth Williamson donated the land to be made into Roker Park in 1880, but it still bears signs of the old caves. Spotty's cave is thought to have been the second on the left. Spotty was a notorious pirate, earning his name from the spotted shirt he wore. It is thought that he was from a subcontinent somewhere, shipwrecked here in Roker in the 18th century. Full of mischief, Spotty would light fires in this cave to trick passing sailors into believing they were heading into harbour. He would then loot the ships for treasure. Spotty was such a nuisance that Whitburn fishwives began to make their journeys to the fish market by boat instead of walking along the beach to avoid the troublesome pirate. It is said that Spotty the Bandit's ghost can be spotted on stormy nights, luring ships to the rocks along the Sunderland coast. Did you know that Spotty's cave is thought to be the entrance to a secret underground passageway? There have been rumours that the cave runs all the way to Hilton Castle, possibly for smuggling riches for the Baron at the time. In the 18th century, some explorers followed the passageway in the cave, but had to turn back due to foul air. Whether it was Spotty's decomposing body or other gruesome goings-on, we'll never quite know the true story of Spotty the Bandit. This area between Roker Park and Holy Rock was a hive of activity during Sunderland's Edwardian seaside heyday. Performances from the Puros and the Jumblies took place at the Holy Rock Dance and Tea Gardens. Deck chairs line up in rows with gentlemen and ladies taking a perch to enjoy the entertainment. The Holy Rock Dance and Tea Gardens opened in Roker in May 1922 and was demolished in the 1930s to make way for Holy Rock to be made safe. Did you know that Roker's Holy Rock used to look like an elephant? Over the years, the sea had carved out the magnesium limestone cliffs here, creating massive caverns and caves. Holy Rock served as a blockade between Roker and Seaburn, getting its name by the huge holes that drew crowds to explore it. People would break bits of the rock to keep as holiday souvenirs and good luck charms, not really helping this dissolvable rock that was at risk of large-scale erosion. In the 1930s, it began to crumble and become a huge liability, with children being in danger of being caught out by incoming tides whilst running through the caves. Parts of Holy Rock were demolished in 1937, creating a completely new coastline with the dance and tea garden sadly long gone. If you look up at the cliffs, you'll see the remains of a historic coastal defence battery. Just above Holy Rock and near where the lifeguard station is today is where Abbs Point Battery was. The first battery was built here at Abbs Point at the end of the 18th century, lasting until the end of the Napoleonic Wars. It was reconstructed in 1859 to defend the Sunderland docks alongside the Wave Basin battery that we saw earlier. Apparently the defences here were described as two useless works mounted obsolete guns, so it's a good chance that our northeast coast wasn't invaded during this time. The Abs Point Battery, which also went by the name Holy Rock or Roker Battery, was demolished in 1937, with only the remnants of brick and stonework being a reminder of long ago. To aid with Roker's rapidly eroding coastline, seawalls were built to stop the magnesium limestone cliffs from crumbling. In 1927, bricks were lined along the cliffs, creating a streamlined shape that would provide a buffer for the pressures of the sea and the northern waves. The height of the seawall varies as you go further along the coast, starting low at Holy Rock, covering its trunk, to rise into most of the cliff near Roker Park. Known as the Deathy Wall to many, young people would clamber over the spiked railings and jump off the lower parts of the wall to the ground. This section of Roker Beach has a bit of a gruesome secret. Veterinary bills were extortionate in the Victorian and Edwardian periods, especially when people were struggling to look after themselves. In desperation, it's thought that dead and sick pets were thrown into the River Wear to end their suffering. Before Roker Pier was built, animal corpses would be washed up at the bottom of Roker Ravine near Holy Rock. The building of the pier caused the currents to slightly alter, so bodies of animals would wash up further along at the steps at Roker, hence the cat and dog steps name. Whilst the cat and dog steps have a very macabre name, it has been a popular place at Roker Beach since the 1900s. Just past the cat and dog steps are the Cannonball Rocks. These strange rocks are composed of magnesium limestone and calcium carbonate, with large cavities being left in the rocks once the carbonates have dissolved. The gnarly rounded forms often resemble cannonballs, so the nickname stuck. I always think that the rocks look a bit like skulls from somewhere like Pirates of the Caribbean. The northeast coastline between Sunderland and South Shields provides an almost 10-kilometre long continuous exposure of the famous Cannonball Rocks. As we continue on along the promenade to Seaburn, it's hard to imagine that this huge expanse was covered in gardens. A beautiful rose garden was planted here just before the First World War, but I don't think it was in that ideal location, especially with being so close to the powerful waves of the North Sea. This little white building to our left is another reminder of Roker's Seaside Resort. The original Art Deco shelter was most likely for the rental of deck chairs and for the purchase of hot water for a seaside cup of tea. Did you know that one of the first public toilets for women are in Sunderland? These rare Edwardian underground toilets near the old Seaburn tram shelter opened in 1901, reflecting the change in times for women being able to spend a penny before enjoying leisure pursuits on the seafront. Public toilets were introduced in the second half of the 19th century, however, most were strictly for men. It was thought that Victorian ladies were too modest to go and use the facilities when away from home. One theory for not installing female toilets is the urinary leash, a cynical ploy to control women's movements and their ambitions outside the home. Lack of access to toilets tied women to their homes, putting them on a leash as long as their bladder capacity. The first public ladies' toilets didn't arrive until the late 1800s at Piccadilly Circus in London, with local businesses and authorities realising that it made financial sense to keep female shoppers there as long as possible. If a lady was able to spend a penny when necessary, they'd be more likely to explore more and possibly spend more money. These original public conveniences in Seaburn retain many of their original features, including a hand basin room, toilets, as well as decorative partitions to the washroom and the cubicles. They are now listed with Historic England as being historically significant. Heading out of the toilets, we can see the old Seaburn tram shelter, which is being turned into a cafe and deli by Black's Corner. I filmed a little history TikTok a few years ago and I've included it here if you'd like to see. I love this section of Roker with the Meek's Lighthouse pictured in scaffolding, as it has had a bit of a repaint after looking a wee bit rusty. There's a lot more construction going on here than usual, with a cycling lane being added and a car park being put next to the tram shelter. Down on the coastline we can see the expanse of the famous Cannonball Rocks that cluster from the promenade out to the sea. We get another look at the old seaside shelter, but this time from a different angle. It's amazing to think of how many people have borrowed a deck chair or retrieved a lost child from somewhere like this. In times gone by, these beaches would have been covered in small tents and deck chairs, rented by families wanting a trip out to the seaside without burning their fair skin. Many opted for windbreaks instead of a tent, as they were a lot cheaper. It was always a hard time getting the deck chairs up, but once they were up, it was time to relax. On the Roker Cliffs there is some hidden history. This seating is in fact a gun battery dating back to the 1800s. Guns would sit on the circular piece of grass, pivoting around the semicircle wall to aim and fire. 2 4.7-inch naval guns were placed here in World War I, while 6-inch guns and searchlights were added in World War II. The searchlights were added to help the battery defend against enemy boats trying to approach at night. The lifeguard station sits now where the Ab's battery did centuries ago, with the mounds of grass perched high being the only real giveaway of this location's past life. Next to the lifeguard station is a piece of military history, a floating navy mine from 1940. These mines were used to block port entrances defensively against U-boats. This mine was restored in 2009 and is a money box and aid for the Shipwrecked Mariners Society. We start to head towards Roker Ravine Bridge, which was erected as part of conditions for the gifting of the land for Roker Park by the Hedworth Williamson family. The bridge had to be built to span the valley, providing access to the land and enabling the expansion of quality housing in Roker. Roker Park was opened in 1880 and has always been a favourite place for me to go as a child. Roker Beach used to be the place to go to in Sunderland for the best bathing sands, with Richardson's hiring out bathing huts that would be wheeled along to the water, avoiding any naked skin being shown to the masses. Many of our ancestors enjoyed a threepenny row from the Roker Baths Hotel in one of these horse-drawn bathing huts. I bet it was quite thrilling being unleashed from the corsets and dresses and being able to plodge about in your own little hut, although the water would have been just as freezing as it is today. I love this photograph from the early 1900s, with the Goliath crane right at the end of the pier, and the lighthouse still to be completed. Our last historic gem is Henry Wake's house. Henry was the chief engineer to the River Wake Commissioners, building and designing Roker Pier and Lighthouse. He lived in this house for several years whilst the work progressed. Imagine living opposite the magnificent feat of engineering that he was creating. I really hope you liked this video and got all the way till the end. I've really enjoyed creating this longer video of Roker's history. Who knew so much history went on here? Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and I'll see you soon. Bye.